LAPD has no comment on what's happening in downtown Los Angeles at this troubled hour, but sources indicate it may be a gunfight over recovered evidence. Sky 5, your local news source.
What you saw there wasn't quite a live broadcast of a shootout in downtown Los Angeles, but was in fact a loading screen for High Tension, a map in EA and Visceral's upcoming Cops and Criminals themed shooter, Battlefield Hardline. The way it was set up might remind a couple of you of the introduction sequences in Battlefield Bad Company 2's Vietnam expansion, and according to Visceral, that's actually very deliberate. If you ask me, EA knows that Battlefield fans want Bad Company 3, but even though it might not be time for that spin-off series to return just yet, it doesn't mean that Visceral can't take some of the elements that made it so magical and find a way to introduce it to Battlefield Hardline. When I asked lead multiplayer designer Thaddeus Sasser about it, he told me how he was a big fan of Bad Company 2's gunplay and how crisp and snappy it was. He also explained his appreciation for the way some of the maps were carefully set up to work great with Rush while others were carefully set up to work great with Conquest. He told me he hopes to recapture that same core combat experience that Bad Company 2 was able to offer, while also putting the same kind of thought into making sure the game really supports Visceral's new game modes. And in addition, he also told me not to be too surprised if I find that Hardline carries the same lighthearted and less serious tone that those games were known for. As a big fan of that series, I was really happy to hear it. But that said, as an entirely new spin-off, Visceral has the chance to introduce some brand new elements and do some things with Battlefield that has never been done before. After all, this is the studio's first crack at the franchise, which could mean some pretty big things. But don't worry too much. Not only is Visceral taking everything they've learned from their work on Battlefield 3's endgame expansion, they're also building Hardline in collaboration with DICE, the veteran developers of the Battlefield series, so they're not alone. While at EA, myself and 31 others primarily rotated between two brand new game modes that Visceral's introducing to Battlefield, game modes that they're calling Blood Money and Heist. Just as their names depict, both offer you the chance to play out that cops versus criminals fantasy, and also offer a very different context from the one you might be used to from previous Battlefield titles. Blood Money was very comparable to a capture the flag style game mode, though instead of trying to capture a flag, both factions wrestled over a large sum of intercepted cash located in the center of the map. In order to win, you needed to fill your duffel bag up with as much money as possible and bring it back to your home base or your vault. The catch is that the enemy can raid your vault at any time and bring that money back to their truck while you can do the same to them. So say it's nearing the end of a round and you're short on cash, a well-coordinated attack on the enemy's vault could really change the tide quickly. Heist, on the other hand, depicted the classic robbery scenario. So as you could probably guess, criminals are tasked with cracking open two different vaults, stealing the money inside, and then bringing those money bags to one of two different extraction points, all while avoiding the fuzz the entire time. What really stood out to me was how the whole thing unfolded. We weren't just plopped on a map and instructed to go to point A or point B. Instead, we were introduced to the scenario through an event that took place in the beginning of the match. Spawning in as a criminal, for example, things really got rolling when a heavily armored truck was intercepted with RPG fire, which in turn drove it off the overpass it was riding on and sent it crashing to the streets below. From there, it was pretty clear that we were the crew meant to crack open the back doors and secure the cash. I didn't really need a heads-up display or a pointer telling me where to go and what to do, because I just knew. Now, clearly, the two scenarios I just described aren't quite like anything you'll find in another Battlefield game. It's still war, but it's war on a much smaller scale. So in Hardline, that means you're not going to be rolling in a battle tank, or an attack chopper, or even a fighter jet. Instead of war-torn cities and other exotic locations, Hardline will provide a more familiar and local setting in some of the hot crime spots in the west coast of the United States. But what does that mean for longtime Battlefield fans who've come to expect those epic 64-player battles and all-out warfare on land, sea, and air? Well, despite Hardline's more personal approach, Visceral is still promising the full range of the traditional Battlefield experience. What we played at EA wasn't quite that, but the experience we did get had a charm all to its own. If you've watched movies like Heat, The Town, or even The Dark Knight, then you definitely know what you're getting into. Hardline takes inspiration from all of these and more, and actually does a really good job nailing it too. All the way from character appearances to weapons and gadgets that fit the fiction, as well as the vehicles. A really nice touch was the authentic dialogue, and even the banter that's shared between both the cops and criminals mid-match. All the stuff you'd expect to hear yelled by both parties in the middle of an intense shootout was actually captured quite nicely. Speaking of shooting, Hardline will offer your fairly standard selection of weapons, including the M16 and AK weapons, as well as your UMP-45, but it will also offer more fictional specific weapons like baseball bats, police batons, and even sawed-off shotguns. Hardline also offers you a number of ways to take down your opponents non-lethally. If you want to whip out a taser and electrocute a guy, you can do that. You can even sneak up behind enemies, subdue them, and arrest them while interrogating them for enemy positions, which will tag nearby enemies on the minimap for yourself and your pals to see. You can even slap on a gas mask and equip your own gas grenades to toss at the enemy and severely mess with their accuracy. I found the combination of the two to work quite well when coming up on a small cluster of enemies huddled together. One of the more significant additions to Hardline is the inclusion of grapple hooks and zip lines, which is something that every class can equip. The grappling hook allows you to scale walls quickly, while the zip line can get you to other advantageous positions or drop you behind enemy lines without them really noticing. As you could probably imagine, they're a bit of a game changer in objective modes when you can easily create your own path to the objective that's hard for the enemy to keep track of. Beyond that, you start getting into the kit-specific gadgets for classes like the Enforcer, the Mechanic, the Operator, and the Professional, which are shared among all 4 factions in Hardline, including your SWAT team, your undercover cops, your bangers, and your thieves. Enforcers have access to first aid packs, revival kits, as well as a powerful arsenal of assault rifles, while PDW-wielding mechanics will repair friendly vehicles and cause damage to enemy air, land, and watercraft with RPGs and anti-air weapons. Operators can be pretty difficult to deal with their light machine guns and shotguns, as well as their ballistic shields and breaching charges. Professionals are pretty good at securing areas with laser trip mines, cameras, and decoys, while also providing overwatch with ranged weaponry. Unlike traditional Battlefield titles where unlocks follow a very specific unlock tree or progression, all your weapons, attachments, and gadgets in Hardlines can actually be purchased in any order you wish, as long as you have the cash for it. If you weren't a big fan of grinding through your pistol unlocks or DMR unlocks in Battlefield 4, you're probably pretty happy with that news. Vehicles in Hardline are a totally different ballgame. Like I mentioned earlier, tanks, attack choppers, and even jets are out, while replacing them is a plentiful offering of transport vehicles that are better suited to the fiction. According to my talk with Sasser, I'm told that Visceral will offer a fair selection of landcraft, aircraft, and watercraft, but the focus here is clearly on transportation vehicles. At EA, we got to play around with transport choppers, as well as the mobile command post and the Syndicate crew cab, which both act as mobile spawn points for both teams. Both are also fairly heavily armored and carry some hefty firepower. Humorously enough, you can also drive a giant fuel truck that really serves the sole purpose of blowing up. But by far the most fun I had was with the coupes, sedans, and speed bikes that Visceral has included in Battlefield Hardline. Police cruisers and muscle cars obviously don't roll with very much firepower, but getting 3 other squad mates to lean outside the back and passenger side windows, you can perform some pretty devastating drive-bys. Of course, a trademark of Visceral was their introduction of the motorbike to Battlefield 3 in its endgame expansion, and naturally it's making a return in Hardline. If you keep your eyes open, you'll definitely be able to find a few crazy jump spots. You'll even be able to take them up elevators and drive them off a rooftop if that's your thing. While vehicle selection can make or break a Battlefield game for a lot of gamers out there, I found that, at least for me, it was Hardline's new focus on these fictional specific transportation vehicles that really sold the fantasy and sold me on the new direction that Visceral is taking Battlefield in general. But I have to admit, I have a hard time seeing how Visceral and EA are going to sell this idea to the general public. Following directly in the footsteps of Battlefield 4, Hardline should be the next bigger, better, and more epic Battlefield experience. But fulfilling the role as a spin-off title, I can't help but get the impression that the studios behind Hardline are taking things a little easier this year and playing things safe, rather than pushing the Battlefield series forward and really bringing it to new heights. Even after my hands-on time with the title, I had a hard time gauging what the intention is there. But I know for sure that I had a lot of fun. And if it's simply Visceral's goal to provide Battlefield fans with a good time that isn't ruined by bugs, balance issues, or quote-unquote netcode troubles, then I think they're definitely on the right track here. Either way, I can't wait to see what Visceral's bringing to the Battlefield, and you'll be able to check out for yourself on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC on October 21st. For more on Battlefield Hardline and to catch my full written thoughts, be sure to head on over to MP First.